Stop everything because something historic just happened. Imagine waking up to find $2.5 billion ripped out of your economy overnight. No negotiation, no warning, just cold, ruthless rejection. That's exactly what China just did to the United States. 150,000 tons of American beef were banned, locked out, and humiliated at Chinese ports. And as U.S. ranchers scrambled to find buyers, Moscow didn't even have to ask twice. Russia swooped in, grabbed the entire opening, and overnight flipped the world's fastest-growing meat market onto its side. But why now? Why so brutal? And why is Russia, of all countries, the one dancing over America's loss? The answers reveal a terrifying story of revenge, strategy, and a global power shift that nobody in Washington saw coming. In this video, let's break it all down because the real story behind China's beef ban is even more explosive than you think. Let's get started. The world initially misread China's move. Many analysts assumed that rejecting 150,000 tons of American beef was merely a tactical tantrum, a temporary bargaining chip meant to force Washington back into quiet negotiations. But they were wrong. Beijing had no intention of reopening the old playbook. This was not a tantrum. It was a calculated pivot, a silent revolution in global trade priorities. Instead of short-term pressure, China signaled it was engineering a new era, one where trade would be dictated not by who could offer the best products at the cheapest prices, but by who demonstrated robust political alignment with Beijing's long-term vision. When China rejected American beef, it wasn't the quality that mattered. It was about reshaping the foundations of global commerce itself. Loyalty, not just supply, had become the new currency. And Russia, almost invisibly in the background, had positioned itself perfectly. Moscow offered what neither Washington, Canberra, nor Buenos Aires could: absolute predictability in the new global order Beijing was quietly crafting. Payment systems routed entirely outside US dollar hegemony, bilateral trade corridors slashed by Belt and Road infrastructure, and above all, no political lectures or strings attached. No sanctions threats, no diplomatic tantrums, just dependable transactions between two powers committed to rewriting the rules of the global economy. The partnership between Russia and China was not sealed over steak quality or export statistics. It was cemented over mutual resentment toward Western dominance. It was a marriage of strategic necessity, a clear, deliberate declaration that the future belonged to those who could operate independently of Washington's political weather. By choosing Russian beef, China wasn't just filling supermarket shelves. It was filling its future with allies who shared its ambition to dismantle the American-led global order piece by piece, shipment by shipment. Beijing wasn't just buying meat. It was buying strategic defiance. And the West, still clinging to outdated notions of market competition, didn't even realize it had been replaced. While China moved methodically to realign its trade alliances, the consequences back in America's agricultural heartland were nothing short of catastrophic. Across Nebraska, Kansas, and Texas, the ripple effects turned into tidal waves. At every cattle auction, the once proud ranchers watched in disbelief as prices sank lower and lower. The meatpacking plants, which had been operating at full tilt just months earlier to meet Chinese demand, now faced brutal choices: lay off workers, slash shifts, or shut down entirely. Storage warehouses overflowed with beef that no longer had a foreign buyer, forcing desperate sales into an already saturated domestic market at devastating losses. The human cost unfolded quietly but painfully. In rural towns that had pinned their economic survival to the growing Chinese appetite for American beef, the collapse was visible in every shuttered storefront, every boarded-up feedlot. Local newspapers ran desperate headlines warning of economic doom. From boom to bust, how China's ban is gutting our towns. County fairs, once community milestones, canceled cattle auctions due to a lack of demand. Feed suppliers, trucking companies, cold storage operators, all the invisible gears of the farm economy began to seize up, shutting operations they had expanded only months ago in expectation of booming trade. And yet, while entire counties bled jobs and futures, the political response from Washington was as tone-deaf as it was destructive. Instead of offering relief or negotiating intelligently, the administration doubled down, announcing even more tariffs, even harsher rhetoric against Beijing, and absolutely no plan to reopen the critical market American ranchers depended on. In a cruel twist, the very voters who had been promised prosperity under America First were now living through a catastrophe engineered not by foreign enemies, but by their own leaders' blindness. For China, the shift was no longer about tit-for-tat retaliation. It was a systematic, strategic gut punch aimed precisely where America was most vulnerable: its agricultural backbone, its rural economies, its political base. And it was working. American farmers, once confident that their world-class products would always find eager buyers abroad, were now confronting a terrifying new reality. In the emerging global order, patriotism didn't pay the bills. Blind loyalty to flawed policies didn't protect markets. Only strategic relevance did. And America, by its own hand, was losing that relevance at a speed few thought possible. However, as America stumbled, Russia wasn't just expanding beef exports. It was entrenching itself deeper into China's food security system. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, and current affairs impacting your lives. New bilateral agreements signed in March 2025 allowed Russian agricultural companies to directly partner with Chinese distribution networks, bypassing middlemen and locking in preferential contracts. Moscow was no longer just a supplier. It was being woven into China's domestic logistics and consumption patterns, creating a dependency that would be extremely difficult to unwind, even if the US someday tried to claw its market share back. And the numbers were staggering. By the end of March, Russian beef shipments to China had already captured 15% of the market America once dominated. With new mega farms and cold chain facilities under construction, all financed through yuan-denominated loans from China's Agricultural Development Bank, Russia was determined not just to compete, but to permanently replace the United States. This wasn't just a trade war anymore. It was a redrawing of the global food map, and America was being erased from it. Interestingly, Russia didn't win because it was the best. It won because America left the door wide open. As US politicians hammered new tariffs on Chinese goods, they overlooked a fundamental reality of modern trade. Loyalty now matters more than product quality. China didn't turn to Russia because Russian beef was tastier or more efficient. It turned to Russia because it needed partners who couldn't be weaponized by Washington tomorrow. That's why China left Argentina, which was once China's proud second-largest beef supplier. However, it crumbled under the weight of its own economic implosion. Hyperinflation spiraled over 207%. Export permits were frozen, and long-term contracts became impossible to price reliably. What was once a stable pipeline became a gamble China could no longer afford. Australia, too, remained a maybe, still carrying the deep scars from the 2020 barley, wine, and beef disputes. Despite tentative diplomatic thaws, sporadic rejections of Australian shipments earlier in 2025 kept Beijing's trust at arm's length. And after years of political brawls with Canberra, China was in no mood for new drama. The United States, the biggest loser of them all, had now become politically radioactive. Every American shipment came loaded not just with meat, but with political baggage, threats, tariffs, and uncertainty. Meanwhile, Russia, often dismissed as the outsider, delivered something no Western power could guarantee: Predictability, political alignment, flexibility on payment in yuan and rubles, bypassing the US financial system entirely. Even if Russian beef had historically been considered lower grade, Beijing made a brutal calculation. It was worth tolerating slightly lower standards in exchange for total control, absolute loyalty, and geopolitical independence from Washington's tantrums. In one quiet but earth-shattering decision, China proved that in today's fractured world, reliability outweighs perfection. Standards can be improved, but alliances built on trust, not intimidation, are priceless. Now anyone still clinging to the hope that this was just a beef dispute was deluding themselves. Beijing made it crystal clear. The retaliation would not stop at steaks and short ribs. In rapid succession, China rolled out new tariffs slamming $11.6 billion worth of American agricultural goods. Sorghum, almonds, pork, dairy. Every major farm export category took a direct hit. Soybeans, the bedrock of U.S. agricultural trade with China, faced the harshest blow. USDA analysts warned exports could collapse by 22% in a single year, wiping out billions from America's rural economy. This wasn't tit for tat. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a strategic realignment, punishing U.S. farm states critical to Trump's electoral base while simultaneously building new, politically loyal supply chains elsewhere. The scale of China's move stunned even seasoned economists. Veterans of the 2018 trade war said bluntly, "This isn't temporary pain. This is the beginning of a structural divorce between American farms and Chinese tables." And once supply chains are rerouted, once payment systems, inspection protocols, rail corridors, and cold chain infrastructure are built around Russia, Kazakhstan, and others, there's no easy path back for America. China wasn't simply canceling orders. It was canceling dependencies. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of all is this: America's agricultural collapse in China wasn't inflicted by Beijing alone. It was engineered by Washington itself. The very tariffs that were supposed to protect U.S. industries are now isolating them, crippling their future access to the fastest-growing markets in the world. As China moves swiftly to lock in multi-decade meat contracts with Russia and Kazakhstan, payable entirely in yuan and rubles, American farmers were left abandoned. Empty promises from Washington could not replace lost contracts. Political slogans could not pay for truck fuel or feed. Pork, beef, and poultry, once staples of the American farm export miracle, now face a grim future. Rendering plants are flooded with unsold inventory. Wholesale prices are plummeting. Margins are collapsing. Small farmers, squeezed between rising input costs and disappearing export markets, are facing bankruptcy at an alarming rate. All while Russia, once considered a minor agricultural player, rises from the shadows into a position of strategic dominance, fueled entirely by America's own political arrogance. What began as America First has rapidly become America Alone. Do you think China just fired the first real shot that could end America's dominance over global trade? Can American farmers survive without China's billion-dollar market? Or is this the beginning of an agricultural collapse? In the comment section below, share your thoughts on whether Trump's tariff war just handed China and Russia the keys to the global food supply without a fight. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, changing world order, and current affairs. Things you need to stay informed. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.